Hey guys, Bread Guide Gaming here. This is my CK3 Legitimacy guide. I'll overview all the mechanics I know of and sprinkle in some strategic opinions. Legitimacy is a new mechanic and can be found at the bottom left or on your character page, and thematically measures how rightful or legitimate your rule is. There are 6 levels of legitimacy, from level 0 to level 5, each with their own bonuses that change based on your rank. I've created this chart to quickly show us the different levels and which bonuses are given. Base level is just reduced short reign. L is for less. For example, L reduce has less penalties than reduce. Each level has a certain value of legitimacy needed, and this value increases for every rank increase and also for every era your culture has discovered. Note that the legitimacy requirement changes immediately if you change your culture from a lower era to one with a higher era. If you have vassals, you will see an average expected legitimacy down here, and this icon here will correspond to the highest level needed, versus if you have no vassals, nothing will be listed down here and it will default to 0. The vassal expectations can be different between your powerful and regular vassals, modified by this list of factors. For every level below, your vassals will have -10 opinion. So King Charles is at level 3 legitimacy. His powerful vassals expect him to be at level 4. And this powerful vassal here has a -10 because he's 1 level under, versus a normal vassal here does not have a penalty. Unfortunately, being above does not grant a bonus opinion. Notice the expectations are separate from the bonuses. We can have low expectations, meaning we won't get opinion penalties if we're level 1, but if we were level 1, we would have level penalties like increased claimant factions. So we want to at least hit the minimum to reduce the opinion penalty, and then later level up the legitimacy to reduce the level penalty. Early game, high legitimacy dukes and kings have an easier time conquering and creating titles. Like if you're a level 5 duke, you can create a kingdom title with only half the counties needed, which is crazy. Later, succeeding as emperor may cause issues, as your starting legitimacy can be very low, so ensuring your heir's personal power becomes more important. There are also specific mechanics on how legitimacy is inherited, which I'll discuss later. Here are all the ways I've found to increase legitimacy. The first way is to win wars. We can gain legitimacy based on our rank relative to the enemy, none for picking on a lower rank, 50 for the same rank, 100 for one above, and etc. There are also bonuses for specific wars, 2 times for holy wars, 3 times in great holy wars, but only the leader / head of faith, and 4 times for specific wars, which mostly are at game start. It also doesn't matter what rank you fight for. It could be a small county or an entire kingdom will give only the same amount of legitimacy gain. The declare war UI is bugged for wars with bonuses, like this holy war against the same rank says it will only give 50, but once you actually declare the war in the enforced demands, it will show you the actual value to be gained. You also gain the same amount with the same rules in defensive wars. From this info, a tip is to try to fight holy wars of the same or higher rank, which makes organizing your faith a priority, as that will unlock holy wars. Another tip is, if you're an emperor, don't destroy a nearby empire completely, otherwise you will lose one of the only sources of potential legitimacy gain. Hosting activities also can gain legitimacy at the end of the event. Feasts, hunts, and pilgrimages give 20 legitimacy. A legendary hunt gives 100 instead of 20. The hunts give legitimacy regardless if you succeeded or not. A funeral gives 50 and requires a recently deceased dynasty member. So the total for non-DLC, if you spam all these activities in one go, is 110 legitimacy, and this assumes you have a body to bury, which if you don't, then it's only 60. More thoughts on this in a second. With Royal Court DLC, you get 50 legitimacy for holding court. With tours and tournaments, hosting a grand wedding, a grand tournament, or a grand tour should give you 50 legitimacy. Grand tours are glitched right now, and I couldn't get any legitimacy, and I also didn't see any in the code. With Legend of the Dead DLC and tours and tournaments, if you unlock the 3rd legitimacy perk, you unlock the espouse legitimacy intent for funeral funerals, feasts, and grand weddings. To change an activity's intent, come to the middle bottom choice here, and now you can select espouse legitimacy. For all three events, this intent will provide chances to gain legitimacy at events in between, with their success dependent on your skills. So if your skills are high, you can easily gain a few hundred between these three activities. Having the theologian trait also unlocks an event choice. With activities, my conclusion is that if you don't have the DLCs, I would save your gold and spend it elsewhere, like on troops or on buildings for your holdings, especially if we also consider the cooldowns for the events. The legitimacy gained per cooldown is actually abysmal. One holy war against the same rank gives 100 legitimacy, and it gives you land, which is more power. So it's better to roll by strength than trying to prove yourself through activities. If you have the DLCs, funerals, feasts, and grand weddings are OP, especially feasts, as they can be spammed more easily. Just note this might take 50 or more years, since it takes a minimum of 2250 renown to get to this level. The only decision in the game currently to give legitimacy is the Raise Runestone decision, which is only available if you have the Northern Lords DLC. It's one of my favorite decisions available, so I always take it. In addition to the piety and prestige, you get 100 legitimacy, and there's a 10-year cooldown. It's sad that other hard and amazing decisions like restoring the Roman Empire doesn't give any legitimacy as of this video's release. We can create legends through the Legends of the Dead DLC to also gain legitimacy. To create a legend, we're going to go to this legend tab here. You need a legend seed, which some cultures or regions default spawn with, or when taking certain decisions like reclaiming Britannia will give you this heroic seed, and this chart with other ways as well. Seeds come in 3 flavors: heroic, holy, and legitimizing. If you meet the requirements for the legend, then you can spend some gold to start it. You will gain legitimacy depending on the quality of the legend, 100, 200, or 300 for heroic and holy legends, and double the value for a legitimizing legend. You also get a bonus of 20 for choosing someone else as the protagonist, and additional bonuses if they have virtuous traits, like my father with 1 virtue, I get 50. This caps out at 200. As of video release, it doesn't penalize having a sin, so a character with 1 sin and 1 virtue is still a 50 bonus. Once you're ready, you're going to click create to create this legend. It's going to start off in a barony in your capital. You can hire a court chronicler to speed up the spread of your legend, and you first want to use the extol domestic legend to spread it within your personal domains. You'll also get events to add additional promoters. Once you get additional promoters, they can start promoting it in their personally held domains. So after some time, when you've used this extol domestic legend until your holdings are saturated, I would change your chronicler to commend legend abroad to start having others spread your legend. You can also click on a nearby ruler, right click them to ask them to promote legend, and if you send them some gold, you can convince them to start promoting it for you. This could be done once per year. Once you get the legend to 100 baronies, you can upgrade the quality, and again at 300. A legend needs at least 5 years of time before you can complete it. You don't need to upgrade a legend to complete it, although you would be missing out on better benefits. You can also take however many years you please in order to spend time to increase the quality. Just remember that there's a monthly maintenance, and this scales with the size of your realm, so it can be an opportunity cost. You can even wait for your heir to complete this. So if we die by natural causes, then my heir can take over the legend by coming to the legend tab, clicking on World Legends, checking what my father started, and clicking on Start Owning, and then you can click Complete here to get a big kickstart in your legitimacy. Just make sure you're paused and you start owning this legend as soon as possible, because any other landed dynasty member can claim ownership, making you lose out on the gains you worked so hard for. The next way to increase legitimacy, if you have captured rulers, you can negotiate their release and release them for legitimacy scaled by rank. There is no gain if you release them with strings attached, so if you're in the intrigue lifestyle, you can repeatedly abduct kings and emperors for some easy legitimacy. This is one reliable way to get legitimacy, although it comes at the opportunity cost of being in the intrigue lifestyle. Every time you create a title, you also gain some legitimacy. If you destroy a title, you will also lose the legitimacy. So unlike prestige, you can't repeatedly create and destroy the title to convert gold into legitimacy. This is small but reliable increases. Anytime you're fighting a faction, if you win the war, you will gain 50 legitimacy, no matter what type of faction it is. This section will detail the ways to lose legitimacy, aka things to avoid if possible. In the big picture, legitimacy acts like a second tyranny mechanic where unrightful actions have consequences. Exposed secrets lose legitimacy based on if the activity is criminal or shunned. For example, being a deviant is criminal in Catholicism, so when I decline, I will lose 100 legitimacy. So one way to avoid this is to create a custom faith where everything is accepted, but this is easily avoided if you just also avoid those vices. Discovered hostile schemes lose 50 legitimacy, or sometimes 20 if you're caught but you abort the mission. Murder is always an amazing tool, so it's usually worth this loss. Marrying a lowborn spouse will cause you to lose legitimacy based on rank. This does not include when you take concubines, so you can filter down here in the dynasty section for not lowborn. That way you don't accidentally click someone who's lowborn. This may hamper genetics programs since it will cut down the amount of available spouses. Disinheriting the primary heir loses legitimacy based on rank, and this amount is reduced for non-primary heirs. Asking the primary heir to take vows will also lose legitimacy based on rank, and this value is only 40% for other heirs. One way around this is if you imprison the target, you will gain some tyranny, but once they are in prison, you will lose 20 legitimacy for this tyrannical act, but then when they're in prison, you can negotiate the release and force them to take the vows for no additional legitimacy loss. So you only lose 20 overall. Here are some other tyrannical actions that reduce legitimacy. Like we saw before, if you imprison someone and it gains tyranny, then you will also lose legitimacy. Revoking title loses 100 legitimacy regardless of amount of titles or rank. So if you're going to do it, instead of doing one at a time, you want to do the biggest piece that you can to minimize the total legitimacy lost. Like tyranny, if you have a claim on the title, when you go to revoke, you will not gain tyranny and you will not lose legitimacy, although you might have to fight a war. Banishing gains tyranny, but it does not reduce legitimacy. Becoming excommunicated loses 200 legitimacy, and when you make declaration of repentance, you will not regain that legitimacy. Losing faction wars also have variable loss amounts. If legitimacy loss matters, if you accept the faction demand, you actually only lose 50. So if you think you will lose anyways, then you can take the easy way out. Losing battles in any war, conquest, claims, or holy wars, including crusades, where the war score lost is greater than or equal to 15%, you will actually get minus 50 legitimacy, no matter what rank or rank difference. If you lose under 15%, then you don't lose legitimacy. You also don't lose any legitimacy if you lose a battle in a raid. If you break a truce, you also lose legitimacy based on your rank. Plagues are a big, uncontrollable loss of legitimacy. Depending on your rank and the severity tier of the plague, you can lose a lot of legitimacy. We have no control over this factor, unfortunately. These are all the things that I've found that modify legitimacy gain. None of them modify the loss amount. For example, Bastard reduces legitimacy gain by 10%. But this does not translate to increasing losses by 10%. Hospices only provide the legitimacy gain starting at level 5, scaling up to 4% at level 8. But the plague resistance gain from the building is the actual benefit, since plagues will devastate your development. So I do recommend getting this building. The Burial Site Duchy building can give up to 20% legitimacy gain, and it gives a massive amount of plague resistance. Although the Burial Site gives a lot of plague resistance, I think having just the hospices should be enough, and instead I personally prefer other buildings that will increase our strength, like military academies or tax offices. A legendary palace requires this clear grounds decision. Each type of legendary building needs a different legend. For a palace, it is to complete a legitimizing legend. The county the extra slot will appear in is random and sometimes is not ideal. However, if you're lucky, it gives a nice 10% holding taxes and more from courtly value. vassals. It also gives 5% legitimacy gain, so this is a nice building to have. This section details how legitimacy is inherited. Whenever you die, your successor will start with an amount of legitimacy based on these factors. A base amount depending on your rank of title inherited, 0 for count and up to 400 for emperor. For court grandeur, 0 if you're at expected, or plus or minus depending on how many levels above or below expectations you are. Splendor, which is renown, gives 50 per level, modified by your rank. Also, cells with yellow shade means there is a 50% reduction while in the cultural tribal era, not the government type. The legitimacy track is 50 per level. Popular opinion is the average of your held counties divided by 4. So if everyone hates you, there can be a sizable penalty. An easy thing to do is to convert everything into your religion. Who's your daddy is a bonus based on if your parents were a ruler. I'm unsure if you get 2 bonuses if both parents were rulers. The predecessor rank is if you inherit the title from someone who is not your dynasty, you gain some legitimacy based on their rank. If they were of your dynasty, you get 5 legitimacy times the numbers of dynasty holders ever. Relation to predecessor is for when you are directly related. If you are the primary heir, you gain 30 legitimacy times a rank multiplier. Or if you were a sibling, like a brother, then it's 20 times the rank, etc. Wrong gender is minus 15, and only and preference are the same. There's also a bonus years as a ruler. I'm not 100% sure, but the code implies a bonus of up to plus 20, calculated by years ruled divided by 2. Traits can modify starting legitimacy and will stack. So for any ruler, stacking virtues is an excellent way to ensure a high legitimacy value. The Wards and Warden DLC will let you influence a ward's personality, meaning sometimes you can consistently pass down virtues. There is also a hidden 1000 legitimacy bonus if your primary title is Byzantine Empire or Roman Empire with copied Byzantine history. Copied meaning you held the Byzantine Empire to form the Roman Empire and not from the Unify Italy decision. And lastly, diplomacy gives 2 times the skill level. Almost everything I said about inherited legitimacy also applies to starting legitimacy. So this character that has 4 virtues is going to start out with a massive amount of legitimacy. You see, we start with 637 and we're already at level 4. And that's everything I know about legitimacy. I have 3 closing thoughts. First, legitimacy is great in the early game because I can take advantage of this increased vassalization acceptance, and even more so if I can get it up to level 5. And that's how I was able to create the Empire of Scandinavia in 3 years versus 6 years before the legitimacy update. And second, legitimacy loss has made certain actions less appealing early game, like disinheriting, but I still do it in the mid to late game when I'm powerful. And third, as we've learned, it's tough to gain legitimacy overall, and it's even harder as an emperor without war targets. By mid game, an emperor needs 1200 to 1400 legitimacy to not be below expectations or suffer penalties. Although with the inheritance knowledge, it is possible to have an heir start with good legitimacy, but if your empire is big, it can be hit by multiple plagues and sweep all that legitimacy away quickly. So my advice is to build up slower from a wealthy kingdom and rule through royal power instead of chasing legitimacy. If this video has helped you, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It helps me tremendously, so thank you very much. You can check out my channel for other guides and leave a comment if you have any questions or want to see a specific topic discussed. Thank you again from Bread God and have a good day.